Hi Poke fans, Harry here, and welcome to my breakdown of the final episode of the Aim to Be a Pokemon Master series, the episode The Rainbow and the Pokemon Master. Now this is the final episode of this series, and it is the episode in which we say goodbye to Ash and Pikachu. Now I actually did my own review of the Rainbow and the Pokemon Master, just going over my initial thoughts and what this episode meant to me and how it bookended Ash and Pikachu's story and what Ash and Pikachu meant to me. But this video is going to go over my full in-depth breakdown, breaking down all the hidden details that you might have missed. But before we get into the video, don't forget to subscribe, also leave a like and comment down below, and let's get in to the video. So, as I said, I already made a video just going over my initial thoughts on this episode, so check that out if you haven't already. And this video is going to be my breakdown, so spoiler warning for the episode The Rainbow and the Pokemon Master. So without any further ado, let's get into this episode. So this episode starts with Ash, Brock and Misty parting ways, and this goodbye between them is similar to the scene from the episode Gotta Catch You Later, which was the original episode that Ash, Misty and Brock parted ways from each other, of course, when they parted ways from each other at the end of the Johto saga. And before they part ways, Psyduck emerges from its Pokeball to say goodbye to Pikachu, like it just emerges from its Pokeball by itself without Misty calling it, like it has done many times in its past. And Psyduck's first appearance, of course, was in the episode Hypno's Nap Time, the episode in which Misty caught it, and its last major appearance was in the second episode of this series, Aim to Be a Pokemon Master, the episode A Fated Face-Off, where Misty rejoined Ash on his journey throughout this series, in actually the episode in which Ash and Misty battled each other. And its last minor appearance was in the episode Rocket Revengers, just a couple of episodes ago. And I actually did a breakdown on A Fated Face-Off and Rocket Revengers, so go check them out if you haven't already. And as Misty is about to part ways with Brock and Ash, Brock asks Misty to tell her sisters about him. Of course, her sisters have been referred to as the Sensational Sisters, and they call themselves the Three Beauties of the Cerulean City Gym, which is why Brock is telling Misty to tell her sisters all about him. So Krogunk emerges from his Pokeball and poison jabs Brock, like he does whenever Brock tries to flirt with a girl, and Brock is kind of doing a similar thing with Misty's sisters in this episode, which makes sense why Krogunk poison jabs him. And of course, Krogunk's first appearance was in the episode Jambalaya, in the episode in which Brock caught it, and its last major appearance was in the episode The Final Battle of Legend. Of course, the episode that it helped battle against Team Galactic, actually defeating Saturn's Toxicroak, which it had a rivalry in the Sinnoh anime. And its last minor appearance was again in the episode Rocket Revengers, just like Misty's Psyduck, of course, which was just a couple of episodes ago. And Ash and Pikachu part ways with Misty and Brock, and as they're walking, they soon see Pallet Town in the distance, and they run home to it like Ash has done many times when he has returned home at the end of a series. And then the intro plays, and in the Pokemon section, it shows Ash's Galar team. But I won't have any footage from the little snapshots they've taken of Ash's Pokemon, because that was in the Japanese intro, and now the scenes have been replaced by the English intro, so it doesn't show Ash's Galar team anymore, the little snippets of when Ash caught them. But I will put Ash's Galar team just on the screen for you now. And that, of course, was in the Japanese anime. And if you would like me to break down the English intro for this series, let me know down in the comments below. But back to the actual episode, Ash and Pikachu return home, and they are greeted by, of course, Mr. Mime and Ash's mum, Delia. And seeing that they are dirty from their adventure, she runs them a bath. And this episode actually marks the first appearance since the episode Ignorance is Blissy, in which a bathroom has been seen in the Pokemon anime. I know it's a weird detail, but I just thought it's a little cool detail that I would share with you. So while Ash and Pikachu are getting clean, they also have a little bit of fun in the bath, splashing each other. And as Ash splashes Pikachu with the water, he references water-type moves. So he mentions Hydro Pump, Bubble Beam, and Whirlpool. All of those water-type moves. And then, unfortunately, Pikachu ends the game there by thunderbolting Ash in the water, which, if we know anything, water is weak to electricity, and a human being in water, when there is a Pikachu thunderbolting, will hurt the human, but as it's Ash, nothing much comes of it. And after Ash and Pikachu have gotten clean, we see the Ketchum family eating dinner, and Delia has made some croquettes, which we saw Ash crave in the episode Brock's Island and the Forest Witch, which I did a breakdown of, so check that out if you haven't already. And Delia last made Ash croquettes in the episode Pokemon, The Distant Blue Sky, which I also did a video breaking down all the details in that episode, so check that out if you haven't already. And at this dinner, Ash is wearing his pyjamas, the actual same pyjamas that he wore in the very first episode of the Pokemon anime, Pokemon I Choose You. And then Ash starts to tell his mum about all his adventures throughout this series, like his travelling with Misty and Brock, and also reuniting with his Squirtle, which was last seen in A Squad's Worth of Passion, and of course that is the Squirtle that is the leader of the Squirtle Squad. However, we don't hear much more of his adventures throughout this series, because why would the anime want to re-explain it to us? And Ash just is wolfing down some croquettes, so he's got his mouth full of food that he can't tell his mum about any more of his adventures. And we go to nighttime at the Ketchum household, and Ash lies in his bed. He wonders how Latios and Latios are. And this is the first episode in the Aim to Be a Pokemon Master series where Latios doesn't make an appearance, because of course, in the last episode, Latios and Latios went to the city of Ultimare, parting ways with Ash and the gang. But passing that, we're on to the next day, and as the sun rises, a Dodrio cries, which is a reference to the first episode of the Pokemon anime, Pokemon I Choose You. And it cries, signalling that it is a new day, just like it did in the episode Pokemon I Choose You. However, Ash doesn't awake from the Dodrio. He is actually awoken by his mum, and it is revealed that he has overslept, just like he did in the first episode of the Pokemon anime, again, Pokemon I Choose You. And he overslept as he was actually supposed to see the 3 Kanto starters before they are given to new trainers. And in his panic, he almost runs out of the room to Professor Oak's lab in his pyjamas, which again is a reference to the Pokemon episode Pokemon I Choose You, in which he actually did run to Professor Oak's lab in his pyjamas to get one of his Kanto starters. Of course, that ended up being Pikachu, and he almost does the same in this episode. And as Ash runs out the house, his mum offers him some new shoes. And the shoes are actually a reference to Ash's original cap, as they both have the same insignia. However, he doesn't accept the shoes yet, even though the shoes he's wearing are worn out. And remember these shoes, because they will be important later. So, arriving at Professor Oak's lab, Ash meets Tracy, and this episode marks the first speaking role of Tracy since the episode Home is Where the Start Is, which was 766 episodes ago. That was at the end of the Battle Frontier arc before Ash went to Sinnoh. So that is a long time ago. That is further back than any other companion. But we have Tracy Sketch, and of course we have him because Tracy is Professor Oak's lab assistant. And that is a job he assumed in the episode The the rivalry revival, where Ash started to journey to Johto with Brock and with Misty, rather than with Misty and Tracy, as Brock rejoined the group and Tracy decided to stay behind in Palatine and be Professor Oak's assistant. And also, it's not only the first appearance of Tracy in a while, it's the first appearance of his Pokemon in a while. We first see his Marill, and then later we get a look at his Cypher and Venomoth. So, Marill was first seen in the episode of the Crystal Onyx in one of Ash and Tracy and Misty's adventures throughout the Orange Islands, and its last appearance was in the episode The Right Place and the Right Mime, where it battled alongside its child, which was Misty's Azurill, as Tracy gave Misty an Azurill egg, which was from his Marill. And then we move on to Tracy's Cypher, and its first appearance was in the episode Tracy Gets Bugged, in which, again, it was one of the travels throughout the Orange Islands, and it was the episode in which Tracy caught it, so he could get it to safety to Nurse Joy, so that Cypher regained its strength, and then Cypher eventually decided to join him, even though Tracy had already caught him. And its last major appearance was in the episode The Rivalry Revival, again in which Tracy stayed behind to become Professor Oak's lab assistant, and its last minor appearance in the main anime was in the episode Bulbasaur the Ambassador. However, that wasn't its last minor appearance altogether, because it actually made a small appearance in the spin-off Pokemon Chronicles in the episode Oaknapped. And finally, we move on to Tracy's Venomoth, which first appeared as a Venonat in the episode The Lost Lapras, of course, the episode in which Ash caught his Lapras, and its last appearance was in the episode in the spin-off Pokemon Chronicles in the episode Bulbasaur the Ambassador, just like Tracy's Cypher. But this is the first appearance to show that Tracy's Venonat has evolved into a Venomoth, because in Bulbasaur the Ambassador it was still a Venonat, and now it has evolved into a Venomoth, which is just crazy. I think this is one of the few appearances to show that a companion of Ash's Pokemon, its Pokemon has evolved off screen. But of course, the main point of Ash going to Professor Oak's lab was not to see Tracy. He was actually going to see the 3 Kanto starters before they got given to new trainers. However, as he arrives to greet Professor Oak, the Charmander has gone missing. Which, you think for a Pokemon professor that specialises in giving Pokemon away to new trainers, he wouldn't lose one of these Pokemon, but Charmander has gone missing. So Ash and his Pokemon decide to search for the lost Charmander. And the Ash Pokemon that we see search for Charmander, since it's better to search in numbers, are a lot. And I will just go over them here. I won't be going over their first and last appearances, because that would be just way too much time. This episode will be hours long. So first up, we see Gengar and Dragonite from Ash's party, which were last seen in Ash's party in Get Into the Heart of It All, which I actually did a video breaking down, so check that out if you haven't already. So obviously they're still in Ash's party from that episode. And then we see, in Professor Oak's lab, we see a couple of Tauros, Scraggy, Heracross, Weasel, Muck, Oshawott, Crocodile, Swallow, Pheasant, Staraptor, Talonflame, Charizard, Pignite, Bayleaf, Bulbasaur, and Quilava. Now that is a lot, and there is even more Ash Pokemon later, so there's a lot of meeting Ash's old Pokemon, which is good. It's his final ever episode. But moving on past his old Pokemon, eventually Ash and Pikachu find the lost Charmander down a hole, and Ash helps it out and returns the Charmander to Professor Oak. And whilst doing this, Ash comes across his old and first ever rival, Gary Oak. Now, Gary Oak is Ash's longtime rival, and obviously he appeared in the first episode of the Pokemon anime, Pokemon I Choose You. And he was actually last seen in the episode This Could Be the Start of Something Big, which was actually the last episode of the Pokemon Ultimate Journeys anime. So while he hasn't been seen in this series, he was in the last episode of the prior series. So it hasn't been a long time since we've seen Gary. Unfortunately, though, we don't get a lot of Gary, as he soon leaves after meeting up with Ash. And he actually congratulates Ash on becoming the world champion, of course, after seeing him beat Leon. And he asks Ash if he is now any closer to being a Pokemon master. And Ash actually carries Gary's question with him, showing how much he wants to be a Pokemon master and actually how much Gary's influence has on Ash and his goal. And Ash spends the next day thinking about this question, but whilst thinking about this question, he spends the day hanging out with his past Pokemon, which consist of a couple of Tauros, maybe the same that we saw from before when Ash was helping search for the lost Charmander and they were helping him. But we do see some new Pokemon as well. We also see Boldore, Glalie, and Palpitoad just hanging around with Ash. And, well, that's all the past Pokemon we get of Ash, apart from one more. But moving past that, we see Team Rocket, the Team Rocket trio, working in the cafeteria in the Team Rocket headquarters. However, they are still not talking to each other. They are still blaming each other from the episode The Rocket Revengers, in which their attempt to catch Pikachu went wrong. And we see them just, working through Team Rocket HQ. And even though they are rushed off their feet, they just don't seem to make up with each other. Until the next scene, in which we see Team Rocket all of them having the same idea to capture Pikachu, but separately, and they actually bump into each other, and they decide that they can't stay mad at each other, and since they all have the same idea, they decide to reunite and team up again to catch Pikachu. And surprise, surprise, they actually managed to catch Pikachu, and Ash can't set him free as he left all his Pokemon at Professor Oak's lab. He obviously didn't think he would run into Team Rocket after not seeing them for one full episode and this episode up until now, but that is a big blunder. However, he is not punished for it as Pidgeot turns up, and this is Ash's Pidgeot, which was last seen 1,151 episodes ago in the episode Palette Party Panic. And this was a long time ago. This was the first episode of the Orange Islands arc of the anime, and it's just insane that we get to see Pidgeot again after this long a gap. Of course, Pidgeot was first seen as a Pidgeotto in the episode Ash Catches a Pokemon, being the second Pokemon that Ash ever catches, and its last appearance was of course in the episode Palette Party Panic, the episode in which Pidgeotto actually evolved into Pidgeot, and Ash released it so it could take care of all the Pidgeys and Pidgeottos in Viridian City, so they wouldn't be attacked by the Spearows and Fearows, of course, in the same forest. However, Pidgeot's last minor appearance was actually in a flashback in the episode Heroes Unite, where Ash reunited with all of his past Pokemon that were at Professor Oak's lab when he arrived back at Pallet Town after beating Leon. However, back to this episode, Pidgeot manages to save Pikachu from Team Rocket, who don't recognise Pidgeot as Ash's Pokemon at first, as they never saw it as a Pidgeot, they just saw it as a Pidgeotto, to which I've realised is that this must be Ash's Pidgeotto evolved into a Pidgeot. And then, of course, Pidgeot and Pikachu send Team Rocket blasting off again, and Ash asks Pidgeot if Pidgeot wants to start travelling with him again. And after getting permission from his flock, he decides to join Ash again. However, this is the last scene we actually see Pidgeot in. I would have loved to see more Pidgeot as him actually being part of Ash's team again. But unfortunately, we don't get to see it. We just move on to the next day, actually, and Ash and Pikachu are relaxing by a river, which has several Poliwag and Poliwhirl in it, which is actually a reference to Ash's Japanese namesake, Satoshi Chijiri, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, whose favourite Pokemon is Poliwag. So that's just a cool little thing. And we see Ash lie down thinking about Gary's question, which is a reference to the episode The Dream Continues, the final episode of the Pokemon Unova anime, where Ash sees all of his companions, including Gary, and confirms that his dream is still to become a Pokemon Master. And while thinking about Gary, while lying down, thinking, is he a Pokemon Master yet? That is a direct reference. However, it soon starts to rain, so Ash and Pikachu run to shelter under a tree, and Pokemon start sheltering under the same tree too, which could be a reference to the Pokemon movie Pokemon I Choose You, which Ash and his friends sheltered from rain in a cave, and Pokemon also sheltered in that same cave, just like Pokemon are sheltering under the same tree that Ash and Pikachu are sheltering under in this episode. And then Ash reveals to, well, us the audience and Pikachu that his idea of becoming a Pokemon Master is to become friends with every Pokemon. So despite being world champion, Ash doesn't think of himself as a Pokemon Master yet. He says that he still thinks of himself as a challenger, which is, well, where the character is defined as when they battle the Elite Four and the champion of a Pokemon game. So Ash still thinks of himself as a challenger, despite being a world champion, at least in Pokemon battling. And the scene of Ash and Pikachu running from the rain to find cover is similar to a scene in the original Aim to be a Pokemon Master opening, where Ash and Pikachu run for cover. And thankfully, the rain stops and Ash and Pikachu run off, and we see them running, and we finally see a rainbow, giving this episode its title, The Rainbow and the Pokemon Master, although it is a little bit of a lie, because although we see a rainbow in the sky and Ash standing there with Pikachu, Ash has just revealed that he doesn't think of himself as a Pokemon Master yet. However, I do find that a beautiful shot. It would have been made even better if we had seen the legendary Pokemon Oh, because, of course, the first time Ash and Pikachu saw a rainbow on their adventure, they saw the legendary Pokemon Oh. But we don't see the legendary Pokemon in this episode, in which we actually transition to the next day, and Ash's mum thinks that he's oversleeping, but as she enters his room, she realises he's gone, and he has actually changed his shoes to the new ones that his mum got him, remember, which have the same logo as his original cap. So, he is ending his adventure with the same kind of, well, with the same insignia that he started his adventure with, but also with the same attitude, hope, joy, and the promise of just an amazing new adventure. And of course, by wearing these new shoes, it shows all of what I just said, but mostly that he is fully ready for a new journey, which his mum realises, as she says, the journey continues, which is what the narrator normally says at the end of the episode, but I think it is even more heartfelt coming from probably the person that knows Ash the most, his mum. And even though this is the last episode of Ash and Pikachu, we see that Team Rocket are still following Ash and Pikachu, of course with the goal of capturing said Pikachu. And then we actually get a callback to the first episode in this series, Aim to be a Pokemon Master, the episode The Winds of Beginning, The Endless Road, which I did a breakdown of, so check that out if you haven't already. It's just a fabulous book, and as we had a lot of references to the first episode of the Pokemon anime ever, Pokemon I Choose You, but we also have references to the first episode of this series. And Of course, in this episode, as in The Winds of Beginning, The Endless Road, Ash throws a two-pronged stick into the air to decide which way to go when Ash and Pikachu reach a crossroads, which again is exactly what he did in The Winds of Beginning, The Endless Road, except with a two-pronged leaf instead of a stick. And it's just a really heartfelt ending because as he throws it up, we freeze frame on that, and over this scene, we hear the original intro music from the first ever Pokemon series, the English series actually, Indigo League, which is just, it's heart-wrenching, but also amazing. And actually, in the Japanese version, the ending scene had text saying, "Next time, a new beginning," of course referring to a totally new protagonist, a new style for the anime, of course being Pokemon Horizons. However, it has been removed from the English dub. I would have liked them to keep it, but is removed, unfortunately, from the English dub. And speaking of the English dub, this episode is actually supposed to be followed by Pokemon The Distant Blue Sky, which I said earlier I did a breakdown of. And actually, Pokemon The Distant Blue Sky in English is actually the final episode ever of Aim to Be a Pokemon Master. So if you haven't checked out my breakdown of that episode, it is more pivotal now than ever. Go back and watch it, as you might have an entirely new perspective on that episode, as that is now, in English, the final episode of Ash and Pikachu, possibly ever. Now, I think this episode was pretty good. It could have been a lot better. I went more over my reasons why in just my review of the Rainbow and the Pokemon Master. So check that out to see my more in-depth reasons of why I think this episode could have been a lot better. Again, it could have been worse, but that is just my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought of this episode. And also, if you like this video, don't forget to leave a like. Also subscribe and share it out. And I will see you next time in an entirely new region.